Hello and welcome once more to another episode of Foundation with Steve Teed. I am your host and servant Steve Teed, always asking you that very important question. What are you building your life on? What is it that you use to answer those questions of life? How do you answer those difficult things? Where do you come from? What's happening in the world? How do I determine what's right and wrong? How you answer those questions is vitally important. That's what this show is all about. We ask it and help you to develop answering that question by looking at news articles and helping you build on a true foundation, the one we proclaim here, the foundation of Jesus Christ. That is where we are. Let me cut back to music and I'll tell you where we're gonna head on today, where we're going today. All right. Now, again, this is going to be probably one of those episodes that right now I don't think it has a theme. I don't think it has a title right now. I'll come up with one as the show goes on, maybe as the ending comes in, that kind of thing. But other than that, we're just going to go with it. But it doesn't mean it's not a vitally important show. In fact, the first half of the show is definitely going to be something you want to pay attention to. One particularly, if you have teens, if you've got particularly teenage girls, and they're on smartphones a lot, they're on social media a lot, and by social media, I don't just mean the Facebook, which is now, I guess, for older people, which I fall into. It's the only one I'm even on, I think, except for, YouTube. But then that are on things like TikTok, Instagram, things like that. We're going to talk about that, because the studies are coming out more and more. And we've got to pay attention to them because there's going to be studies on mental illness. So we're going to look at that in our first one. And then we're going to go and look at a couple of articles together. I'm going to lump them together because they're under one topic, under one heading. And it's going to be under watch what you wear. Not watch what you eat, watch what you wear. Watch what you wear. And we're going to talk about clothing. Clothing. So that's where we're looking at the first half of the show. We're going to be looking at mental illness and clothing. That's it. And you go, well, what does that have to do with foundation? Well, you'll see as we get into it. So let's get on into the show. Let's get into this episode and let's see where we're going. If we're going to be jumping in and we're going to be hitting a news article, you know what that's coming. If you've been with me, you know the music I'm going for always happens. All right, there it is. The music's on. So what is the article? Here it is from the Daily Wire. Social media is influencing teens to adopt mental illness identities, research says. Let me read that again. Social media is influencing teens to adopt mental illness identities. Adopt mental illness identities. All right. So I gotta admit, I deal with teens quite a bit. I do deal with teens. And it seems that a lot of them nowadays are dealing with mental illness. And it's amazing. I read a lot of stuff. I admit, I read things like BuzzFeed's, certain articles on BuzzFeed, certain things on Slate. And the reason being, I look at the advice columns, and I'm not looking for the advice itself. What I'm looking for is the people who write in. And I want to see what are they writing in about. And I know some of them are fake. There are people who write in, but I'm looking to see what's behind it. And I look at these things, and if I put all these things together, what I vastly realize, and what I quickly realize, is how many of them claim they have mental illness. How many claim to have mental illness? And some of them are like, well, it's like, it was great to be diagnosed as blah, 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 blah. And one of the reasons is people are like, oh, diagnosed with OCD. It's like, I've got OCD. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to look up OCD because I'm pretty sure I know what OCD is. And what these people are describing, I said, I don't think is OCD. I think it's something else. They're describing OCD. Then they say, well, there's somebody who's got ADHD. And they're like, having it as ADHD. Look, I'm somebody who has ADHD. I am. You learn to function with it. There's things that are a little odd. There are things that make your life a little different. There are. And that's just the way it is. But what is happening is that, and I'm firmly believing this, that I'm going to say a lot of them a lot of them, particularly teens coming in, they're not diagnosed by professionals. They're going to be what's happening here. It's called self-diagnosis. And it's happening. Let's get into the article a little bit. Let's start to dig down a little bit. Okay. Researchers have examined the troubling trend of teens self-diagnosing mental illness through social media. A new paper published earlier this month in Comprehensive Psychiatry proposed that social contagion through prolonged social media use can explain why some teens, mostly adolescent females, self-diagnose their purported rare mental illness and personality disorders online. We believe there is an urgent need for focused, enriched empirical research investigation into this concerning phenomenon that is related to the broader research and discourse examining social media influences on mental health, said the study's lead author, John D. Haltigan. I think's the name there, Haltigan. And co-author, good luck on this one to me, Gayathiri Rajkumar. Gayathiri Rajkumar? Sorry to the author there. I did my best here. In a recent article for Reality's Last Stand, the paper focused on the uptick in teens presenting with tics with no biological cause and the resurgence of extremely rare multiple personality disorders, now called dissociative identity disorder, in which a person claims to harbor multiple distinct personalities. Also mentioned are the prevalence of autism, depression, eating disorders, and gender identity-related conditions on social media. Now, I want to stop there just for a sec. Because that right there would probably get some people listening to that and say, well, we're going to discredit it right there. Because what it's purporting is that a lot of the people, particularly teen girls, who are now coming out with these disorders, it's not that they're not real. It's that they're not actually psychologically caused. Now, what I mean by that, I don't mean they're not psychologically disorders. I mean they're not caused by such things such as chemical imbalances anymore. They're very different. They're being caused by being exposed to it over and over and over to it. And that's what is happening. And it's typically, it's going to be with teen girls. Look, now, I'm a father of boys. I got all boys. And my boys use computers. No secret about that. My oldest son's got his own YouTube channel. It's just a bunch of, we'll say, junk for the most part. There's no real purpose behind it or anything like that. But I'll tell you this much. He's got far more followers than I do. I think like my top watched video only has like less than 200 views. And he's got a video that's got like 45,000. So as a YouTube creator, he's far better than I am. I'll give you that. I'll give him that. Shout out to him. Props to him. My teenage son is better at creating YouTube content than me. Good. But he's not spending time on social media. He plays on his computer, but he's playing games. And he keeps videos on. He's got his favorite videos that he likes to watch. He's got things he likes to watch. But a lot of these are on TikTok. And they're watching them over and over and over and over again. And something is happening. So what exactly is happening? Well, let's continue on. It says, the rates of teen and adolescent depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation have risen precipitously since the advent of social media and smartphones is likely no coincidence, the author said. The paper proposes that social media platforms like TikTok, whose core user base are teen girls, and the popularity of online communities that glamorize mental illness may act as a spread vector for adolescents to adopt various disorders as part of their online personas. Is that amazing? They may pick them up to adopt them as online personas. While posting about personal struggles with mental illness online may be emotionally genuine for some, It is more accurately understood as a behavioral display to fit in and appear unique to others online, the author said. Since the pandemic in 2020, while many were shuttered indoors, relying heavily on social media, neurologists began seeing droves of teen girls reporting the sudden onset of physical and verbal tics. Experts believe the teen girls around the world have started reenacting tics after watching popular influencers with Tourette's syndromes on TikTok. Neurologists call them functional tics or functional tic-like behaviors, as they appear to start out of nowhere. And functional in medical terms refers to no known physical cause. No known physical cause. We have a word for that. Psychosomatic. 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 I remember there's an episode of Seinfeld where George kept doing like an elbow tick. And he was doing it all episode, and he was joking about it, how he would do it. He said, I can do this all day, and Jerry's backing him up, saying, yeah, he can do it all the time. And then at the end of the episode, they played off for laughs, but George actually hits his arm, and he ends up with that very tick that he can't stop it now. But what is happening is these people who, they watch it over and over and over again, and they pick it up. So there actually is there's no actual reason for it. Let me give you an example of something that's completely different of this. I knew a missionary family, both Canadian, spoke Canadian accents, whatever that is. Whatever it is, I've got it. Their son, though, was born in the UK. And when they came back to Canada, the missionary parents, they still spoke with Canadian accents, but talking to the child all talked in a British accent or a UK accent. And you go, well, why would that be? Because they were surrounded by it for so much that they picked it up. And this is basically what's happening. Is that they're picking it up they're watching it so much that they're developing it themselves. This can happen. You see it happen in other things that people don't quite understand. Such thing as yawning. Somebody yawns in a room and people start to yawn. Why? Don't know. They're not entirely sure why. But this is what's happening. And here's what it says. So it says, so functional tics is what they're picking up. Differ from Tourette's, a nervous system disorder with a known physical cause characterized by repetitive, unwanted movements and sounds that usually begin in childhood. Tics can be imitated by watching others with tics, similar to the phenomenon doctors described of witnessing sibling children with seizures develop functional seizures. It can happen. It can happen. It was rare. It used to be rare, so you'd have the rare occurrence where if one child had a seizure, the other one would have it for no actual psychological problem. There's nothing wired wrong. They pick it up just because they see it all the time and they react to it. Now you've got teen girls who are spending a lot of times on their phone. Yeah, this is what's happening. And look at what's being picked up. It says on TikTok, the hashtag. So if you're not familiar with hashtags are just kind of what how you can look up something. If you typed hashtag, it means, okay, I want you to search for this. We used to type searches, but that's what it means. You can make that show up in a search. So Tourette's had 7.6 billion views. Billion with a B. That means typically if every single person on earth went on TikTok and searched for Tourette's, that's what that'd be. DID. That's diminutive identity disorder. Has 2.4 billion views. Borderline personality disorder has 1.5 billion views. Transgender and autism, 16.9 billion. That's both of them. Both of them. Now, the reason, again, I said that this study would be not accepted by many is because it's lumping in the idea that so many people are turning to transgenderism is because they're just being exposed to it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's what it is. It says, unfortunately, many content creators posting these videos are not medical professionals. but are instead self-identified patients or mental health advocates who often speak on mental disorders with little to no expertise on the matter, the authors said. In the dissociative identity disorder portal, popular content creators capture themselves switching alters, summoning their distinct personalities in a short video format. And then it says, historically, fewer than 200 cases of dissociative identity disorder were documented over many centuries, until the popular 1976 TV show Sybil featured a woman who suffered from the affliction. By the 1980s, that's 4 years later, one estimate found that more than 40,000 patients, mostly women, had come out of therapy believing they had DID. Recently, mental health professionals have seen another boom in self-diagnosed DIDs, which they believe is socially influenced, not organic. The authors argue that these novel mental illnesses have become identity signifiers and are used to build a social media following. They may incorporate mental illness symptoms, presentations that they are exposed to in online communities to socially assimilate and build social capitals within these communities, the author said. Now, I'm not going to read a whole lot more, but there is something else I want to pick up a little bit here in this article, and it's right here. This paper sources the onset of mental illness content to a social media platform that was popular in the 2000s called Tumblr. It provides users who typically were seen as outcasts, now look what it says, with a sense of community and belonging. And then there's a note I agree with in the next article here. In 2012, Tumblr implemented a policy against blogs that promoted eating disorders, self-mutilation, and suicide due to the popularity among teens and young adults. It says the authors note the attempts to destigmatize and normalize mental illness may have the unintended effect of glamorizing it. And I agree with that. So this is a question here. The reason I wanted to go through all that is one of the questions that we want to ask is what is going on? And parents may want to be asking what is going on. Grandparents maybe want to be asking what is going on with my grandkids? Why is this happening? And I'm going to tell you one of the things that you may need for a while to take away from your kids is this. It's the phone. Take away tablets. Take away phones. Take them away. I'm going to tell you a true event here. A couple of years ago, I had a youth group, had a party. We were having about 20 teens come out. It was a Christmas party this year, I believe, or it was the end of the year party. End of the year party. It was a party that went late into the night, and there was a particular girl that came. Good girl for the most part. She'd been having a rough go, and she was completely we're gonna say troublesome for the first like half hour. She really was. Wouldn't listen, wouldn't do anything. All she was her phone, and I took her phone from her, and I put it away. I locked it away. I locked the phone away. Amazing thing is, she was mad. Yes, she was mad for the next little bit. For the next hour of the thing, for the rest of the time, for the hour, she was actually good. She was acting happy again. She was interacting with people, playing the games, talking with people, eating food, having a good time. And then I was one of the drivers, so I had my van. I was driving them home, and it was that night, so I gave her back her phone. And the second I gave her phone, it was literally like just like that. The second I gave her phone, her entire personality changed. Her head went back into her phone. Her personality, she became moody again. She became angry again. This is what happened. We noticed this also with our own child, our oldest son. He had been playing one of the games over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, he became very combative. He became, he just wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen. He would become argumentative. We took his computer away for 2 weeks. We did. Took it away for 2 weeks. And I tell you, at the end of those 2 weeks, he was a different kid. If we want to start helping these kids, take away the tablets, take away the phones. I'm not talking about video game consoles. I'm talking about just take away the internet for a couple of weeks. Do it for a month. Take them away. Stop allowing them to shut themselves off in the room. Stop allowing them. Why? Because what is happening is they're engrossing in these things and they're picking up these things. That is what is happening. That's what the article's about. And this is the proof that it's there. It's happening more and more. They're picking it up. Why? Because it's being celebrated. Look, we're living in a society that's glamorizing mental illness. Glamorous. Oh, I'm ADHD and I can act this way. And I remember I said I used to read articles. I read articles about for asking for help, those helplines. And I remember one set of parents even writing in saying, "Look, our daughter she always had difficulties, but she was doing all right. And then we got her into therapy, and she was diagnosed with ADHD. And then they said the second she was diagnosed with ADHD, all of a sudden she couldn't do anything for herself anymore. What happened?" And the problem is the daughter's like, "Oh, it became glamorized." And look, I can speak for ADHD. I know what it's like. My wife gets frustrated with it. She doesn't always understand it. My wife's got something else that causes us to clash at times. That's the way it is. It's just a family. We relate to each other that way. But part of it is, it's not that I can't concentrate. When I concentrate really well. Other times I got 3, 4, 5 things going at the same time. I have to. That's why I'm always doing multiple things. It's why I'm never standing still a lot of times. It's just the way it works. But what is happening for a lot of these people, it's social media. They're being influenced in it. They are. They're picking it up. Why are they suffering from so much anxiety? Because they're listening to people talk about anxiety. Why are they suffering depression? Because they're watching videos that are constantly on depression. They are. This is what is happening. And I'm almost coming to the point where I'm begging you, if you're finding your child falling into this, and you know they have a phone, take it away. Take it away. Make sure they don't have data. Are they going to get mad? Yes. Because their addiction is to it. Take it away. It's going to be hard. But they're going to be better off for it. The same thing goes with many adults too. But you notice it's teen girls that are the biggest impact. And you look at the biggest issues that we have. I don't think it's any secret that if it's teen girls that are the biggest influence of this, that you're also seeing the numbers show that transgenderism is the biggest in teen girls. Let that sink in, what is being said. Let that sink in. All right, I'm going to get to the second story for this half. The one that I'm going to double together. All right, there that is. There we go. That says I got to get to the next story. All right, I used to watch a show. My wife, back when we were dating and stuff, and we were engaged, she'd have to come over to my apartment as we were planning out the wedding, or should I say that she was doing a lot of wedding planning and I was just saying yes or no, that kind of thing, in between when school and work, that kind of stuff. And we used to watch shows, and when we were first married, we liked to watch shows, and I'd watch what she'd watch. So I watched a lot of like TLC, and one of the ones that she would like to watch, and I didn't mind watching, was a show called What Not to Wear. What Not to Wear. My wife would probably say I probably needed to be on the show, but that's kind of the way it goes. But it was a show where they help you with your fashion, saying, "Oh, you don't wear this. Don't go to," and they'd give them fashion tips. They'd take out their wardrobe, give them so much money, and say, "Hey, here's the stores. Go buy." And after so much time, Stacy and Clinton, that's the host names, I think. They would come in like halfway through the shop and say, "Okay, let's see what you got," and they'd work it out and help them work out the fashions to work it together. But they teach you what not to wear. Now, these two articles are right on that idea of fashion. I'm gonna do two of these very quickly together. But here I want to look at the first one. Here, a man wearing Jesus Saves T-shirt at Mall of America asked to take it off or leave. He's being asked to take off his shirt or leave. Isn't that interesting? So what's the story about? I'm going to be fair in this story. What I mean by that, I'm going to give you the whole story. You can find this on YouTube. You can find that where they give you kind of a video of it, the confrontation between the man and the security guard. I'm just going to read it rather than let you watch it, just because it looks a little easier. And it's easier to understand. But because it's going to give you more information. A street preacher in Minnesota who dared to wear a t-shirt declaring Jesus Saves to the Mall of America in Bloomington was recently threatened with eviction from the mall if he didn't remove the shirt because it was offending people. The t-shirt also had a message stating, Jesus is the only way, with the word coexist crossed out. Jesus is associated with religion and it's offending people. A mall security guard can be heard telling the preacher, identified as Paul Shoro, in a video recorded by Chemical Rawls and shared on Facebook. Shoro attempted to explain to the security guard that his t-shirt wasn't about religion but eternal life. But the security guard told him it's the same thing. All we are asking you to do is to take your shirt off, the guard said. Now, sorry, it's just going to lead me to a question. Are guys allowed to shop in malls with no shirts on? I thought they made it a clear policy for all that shirts are required. So what was he supposed to do on that? I'm just curious. Let's go back to the photo here a little bit. It is possible, we're looking at the photo here a little bit, that he's got two shirts on. I don't know. Or that could just be one shirt. What was he supposed to do? Take the shirt off and just leave it? Trusting, or make him have to buy something else? Maybe it's a good scam by the mall. Take that shirt off, but you got to buy another one. Kind of thing. Or get out. That kind of thing. I don't know. But he's asked him to take the shirt off because the guard said it's offensive. When Sorrow insisted that he didn't speak or say anything to anyone except wear his t-shirt, the guard insisted the only options he had were to take the shirt off or leave. If you want to shop here, you need to take that shirt off, the security guard declared to Sorrow forcefully as he kept inquiring why his shirt was offensive. Again, sir, it's religious soliciting. There's no soliciting on property that is private property, the guard said. Now, here's the thing. What brought this all about? Well, you notice that it already said he was a street preacher. Okay? That's kind of a thing there. But let's look at the actual... look what he says. The preacher would later explain in a follow-up interview with Kingdom Business that he had been handing out tracts and witnessing at the mall a few weeks prior to the controversial January 7th encounter, and the security guards warned him not to do it. So there he actually was proselytizing. Technically. So they say you can't do that. This is our property. You can't do that. Okay? So he had been proselytizing. Says a couple of weeks they find out that I'm doing this and they warn me, do not do it again. And I was really, really, really very angry because, they allowed tens of thousands of people in that mall. It's the biggest mall in America. So I was mad because they stopped me from preaching the gospel. During the recent concluded Christmas holiday season, Shore explained that he was suspended for 24 hours for handing out tracts. Okay. The day the mall security told him he needed to take off his shirt, he told them, I'd rather go to jail or I'd rather die. He said the Lord eventually sent an officer to intervene on his behalf, and the officer spoke to the security guards. He was told that he was good to go in the mall with the shirt intact. Now, I don't have a picture of the back of it here, but I've seen the back of the shirt too, which is definitely probably what they're more upset about. But, so the confrontation came about, and let's be honest in the whole thing here. The guy has been caught for handing out tracts and witnessing at the mall. Weeks prior, he was told, stop doing it and banned for 24 hours. He's upset about that, but he complies. So he comes back wearing a t-shirt and, for the most part, he's just shopping. That's all he's doing. He's shopping with the shirt on. But he must have been, we'll say, flagged, because they'd be watching him. And so he's told, do not wear this shirt. And they're equating the shirt itself with a slogan as proselytizing. That's what it is. Now, two things here. One, on private property, technically, they can make a decision what's appropriate and what's not. They can. Schools, things like that, private property. But the law has already dictated places such as malls and things, although the buildings themselves are owned by private institutions, they're open up for business to the public. And what I mean by that is the fact that they rent out stores, they rent out space, and they allow people in. So the building itself is owned, but it's open to public. That makes it different than places such as churches and any other business, I guess. That would be open, like businesses, gyms, churches, because the building itself is open to public. So the man isn't in violation. He's not in a private he's in a private building open for public, so there's no restriction there. So the problem really came down to his message. That's what it was. And so and I guarantee what's going to happen in this discourse, and I've already seen discourse on it, is some people are on one side saying, hey, it's persecution, and because of it, and I'm going to argue, yeah, technically it is persecution. Because of what his shirt says, it'd be thrown out. If he was wearing I support LGBTQ, or if he was wearing something in Black Lives Matter is the only way, or if he was wearing something like that, they wouldn't have said anything. In fact, when I'm putting together this show for today, I didn't know which articles to go. There were so many articles I could have done, so many stories, but I'm trying to branch out a little bit here, instead of staying on some topics over and over again. But certain things that they allow and that they're not allowed, they're picking and choosing which ones not to allow. And so this one here was specifically chosen. They said, we don't want this. This is proselytizing. Get rid of this. Get rid of it. Yeah. The message of the shirt is what the problem was. But if you walked in wearing anything else, they wouldn't care. And anybody who was offended would just say, yeah, whatever. They'd give you a dirty look and walk off. But it's the message of the shirt. It's the message. So basically, this is one of those ones that I'm kind of like, I don't know who to side with. Would I wear a shirt like that? Absolutely. Would I wear it in the mall? Absolutely. I would. But at the same time, I think he's also, I don't know if he's doing it with malice against the mall itself. I don't seem to think so. I think the location he's chosen to do this kind of thing is because it holds so many people. And I think he's trying to work around the rules. But at the same time, what you're seeing is a kickback against Christ. That's what the problem is about. Because the shirt is offensive, is what they're talking about. The shirt's offensive. That shirt is proselytizing, is telling about Jesus. So that's kind of the issue. Now, I want to go to the second one here. On the same vein, the same vein here of what not to wear. But this one is coming from NHL, but I'm going to do it a little bit way. You've probably heard of this already if you've been in the news a little bit. Philadelphia Flyers decided to hold a Pride Night. Pride Night. Yeah. Look, I'm sorry. How many Pride things do you need? How many do you need? It was a day, then it was a weekend, then it was a week, now it's a month. Well, they're not going to be happy until it's everything. They're not. But on this particular, the Philadelphia Flyers decided they're going to have a Pride Night, and they have a player on their team, Ivan Provorov, I think. Look, I don't follow hockey. I don't even watch sports that often. I enjoy playing sports, both virtually and physically. Getting a little older physically, but I still enjoy it. I don't really watch it. It takes a little bit for me to know it. And I'll admit, the reason I would know players on certain teams and things is because I played the up-to-date game and I know the roster. That's all it is. But he refused to wear it. Now, sorry, let me rephrase that. He declined to wear the jersey. Now, the Philadelphia Flyers, they decided they were going to hold this night, and they were going to, during their warm-up shootout, warm-up kind of thing, they would put their numbers, their jerseys would have rainbows on them, rainbow jerseys, and they would put rainbow tape on their skates, and then at the end of the warm-up, at the end of the night, they would sell off the jerseys and jersey and sticks, and the money would be donated to LGBTQ charities. I think that's how it was going. But Ivan Provorov, again, how we say his name, Ivan, just for easy sake here, declined to wear it and decided I'll just skip the warm-up. That's all it was. He says, I don't want to wear it. I'll decline, and I'll skip it. And that's what he did. And the reason he refused, he claims, was, he says, because he's Russian Orthodox. He's Russian Orthodox. And he says it's against his faith. It's against his faith. So this is a what not to wear where we got Ivan who's saying, I'm not wearing it. It's not appropriate to wear. Stacey and Clinton on what not to wear will tell you, you don't wear that. You don't wear that. He's saying, I won't wear that. That's what he's saying. And so this should have been just something that was so small that a player skips warm-up. Nobody should really think about it. Nobody should complain about it. Whatever. And then you've got reactions to this. And this is one of the reactions I want to look at. But the coach, even in the press, was asked, would you ever consider benching him for this? And the coach was like, no. Why would I? He's got his own personal convictions. That's the correct answer. In this case, I'm going to say the Philadelphia Flyers handled it correctly. They did. Absolutely correctly. Both sides. Both Ivan and the management of the team. Absolutely. The coach did. Yes. Beautiful. But others don't agree. I'm going to go to the extreme here. This guy. Sid Seixeiro, a Canadian broadcaster for Breakfast Television, took time during a segment discussing the recent reaction to Philadelphia Flyers defenseman refusal to wear an LGBTQ-themed pride jersey to verbally attack the Russian Orthodox player, as well as religious individuals who don't bend the knee to the LGBTQ plus agenda. You can find his whole interview, but I'll cover what he says. The situation occurred earlier this week when the press noticed that unlike other members of the team, Provolov did not wear the Pride Night warm-up jersey featuring the LGBTQ rainbow. The hockey player cited his traditional Russian Orthodox beliefs as his reason for abstaining from endorsing a lifestyle that is contrary to his faith. Now, for them to notice that, I'm guessing it'd have to be a sports writer who specifically covers the team and is paying attention during the warm-up who's not there. Now, hopefully, they're only doing that because they're looking to see maybe there's an injury. Newsworthy stuff. But in this case, they must have noticed that he didn't show up for warm-up, but he showed up for the game. And they're like, okay, what's going on here? This is unacceptable. Ivan responds, I respect everybody. I respect everybody's choices. Said Ivan, sorry, just 'cause I'm tired of messing up his name. My choice is to stay true to myself and my religion. We don't support that, so there you go. He didn't make a fuss at it. He was asked about it. That's the way it was. Ivan received public support for his choice not to partake from the Flyers head coach, John Tortorella. With Pravi, I like that one. Pravi, that makes it easier. Pravi, he's being true to himself and his religion, Tortorella said when asked about the situation by members of the media. This has to do with his belief and his religion. It's one thing I respect about Pravi. He's always true to himself. Isn't that funny that that's the message of the LGBTQ? Be true. Just be true to yourself. And this guy's being true to himself. Yet they're mad about that, saying he's not allowed to be true to himself. Now, how far does it go? During the on-air segment discussing the Pride Night controversy, Seixeiro, that's the sports person or the breakfast broadcaster person there, began to rant and even go on to say that the NHL should lay punitive action on the Philadelphia Flyers as a whole for violating the rights of LGBTQ plus people. Hold on, what? How did he violate their rights? How? He says, John Tortorella, many years ago when racial injustice, and it is still to this day, when Colin Kirkpatrick first started kneeling during national anthems, said anyone who does that on my team is going to sit. And he has a son who is an Army Ranger. So it's not like Tortorella in the past hasn't spoken on sensitive issues, said Seixeiro. The theme for the NHL is hockey is for everyone. Okay, he continued. The theme is not hockey is for everyone unless you don't believe in gay rights, then do whatever you want. If the National Hockey League is going to do this, if any league's going to do this, do it properly or reevaluate what you're doing, because there's not a lot of repercussions that I'm seeing from any league. Let me stop there for a second. He made the statement saying if the NHL is for everybody, and then he says, unless you don't believe in gay rights. In other words, he said it kind of awkwardly. Let me put it in the proper way. He's saying that the NHL is supposed to be open for everybody. Okay, that's fine. But then he's kind of saying that certain people don't have to follow the rules. What rules? What rule is there? So he's asking for the NHL to implement a rule that says to play in the NHL, not only do you have to be an expert hockey player, I guess, because you should be if you're in the NHL, although some may debate that about some players. He's saying you've also got to agree that you believe in certain aspects. Because I'm pretty sure that Pravi, using the coach's word there, Pravi is not saying that an LGBTQ person can't play on the team or can't play in the NHL. I'm pretty sure he's not. I'm pretty sure there's no rule saying that. What he wants is for the NHL to put a rule in saying you have to believe this or you can't play. That's what he wants. And he wants anyone who's not going to do it, and any player who doesn't, he says, I want them to suffer repercussions. That's what he's saying. So from there, Sexurio escalated things by stating that the NHL should directly target Pravi to make an example out of him. He says, I think you fine the Flyers $1 million for this. I'm not kidding. Figure this out and stop offending people on nights where it's not about that. It's supposed to be about inclusivity. You see the problem? Because a guy would not wear a jersey during warm-up, and he did it respectfully, that if you weren't even really looking for it, you may not have even paid attention to it. It's not like he was out on the ice when everybody else had it. Everybody on the ice that was doing the warm-up was wearing the Pride colored jerseys. So it wasn't like he was out there wearing just regular jersey. He wasn't even there. Everybody on the ice had it. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't have even seen it. And it wouldn't have been an issue. But look at what's happening. It says you have to wear it. You have to agree to it. And this broadcaster is almost going as far to say that unless you agree with LGBTQ, you're not even welcome in the NHL. He says that's what he wants the rule to be. And any team that would dare hire somebody who would not wear the jersey, would not put the patch on, would not stand up and say it, would not take the knee when they're supposed to take the knee, they're not supposed to bend over and bow and let others do what they want to do. Anybody's not, that team should be fined. Yet this is what it's coming to. This is what the problem is. See, this is where we're headed. And this is what we've got to watch out for. There's a lot more to that. He's just going to continue to rant on about beliefs and things like that. And the thing is, when you read the comments of these articles and you go through them, it's how many people agree with him. Maybe not to the extent of finding the Flyers, but basically saying that if they're going to claim themselves, that if they're a Christian, that any belief system that would say that homosexuality is wrong has to be done away with. That's what they're saying, and this is what he's saying. He's basically saying the same thing. That's what you've got when wearing that clothing in the mall. You say you're not allowed to wear that here. Why? Because it's proselytizing. It's offending people. In other words, you're getting a dress code not just for schools and things. You're starting to getting a dress code for society. That if you mention Jesus, even on your clothing, it's not going to be acceptable. But if we tell you to wear something with this patch on it, with these colors on it, you better do it or we're going to ostracize you as well. This is where society is going. This is what I want to just give a warning towards, because it's happening more and more. But have we closed our eyes to it, or are we aware of it? Because that's what we need to do. All right, we're going to take our break there. It's been a little bit longer here. I know we're hitting close to the 45-minute mark. Thank you for sticking with me. For those who break it up, you're free to take the break. Come on back after the break, and we'll continue to help you build on the foundation of Jesus Christ. So come on back as we continue to learn together.
On behalf of the team at Creation Ministries International, thank you for your first-time visit to creation.com. Creation or evolution? Design or time and chance? It's a foundational question that affects every human being. And that's because what you believe about where we came from affects your ideas about the meaning of life, how you live it, and where you're headed. You see, what you believe about where you came from also shapes your view on whether there's an eternity or not. If we are the result of meaningless chance, then we simply return to nothing when we die. But if there is a Creator God, the Bible tells us that He has done something about the fact we will all eventually die. But can the Bible be trusted in an age of science? We pose three big questions and hope that you can see that the answers to questions 2 and 3 depend upon what you believe about the first one. Creation.com represents over 30 years of research by many scientists and specialists, and here you will find articles and media presentations on this hot button topic, the creation versus evolution debate. Best of all, it's all free. Many have questions like, what about dinosaurs in the Bible? Could God have used evolution? Is there life on other planets? And why would a loving God allow suffering and death? We've endeavored to answer these and hundreds more. So please enjoy creation.com.
All right, welcome back after that little break there, or maybe a long break if you took some more time off. I know that these episodes can be a little bit longer and you might want to break them up, and that's a good thing. You can listen to them throughout the week before you get to the next episode. And we're going to be kind of picking up where we left off before the break a little bit. Truthfully, I wasn't sure where I was going to go in this half and kind of made up my mind now, so let me finish off this music here, and I'll tell you what I'm kind of thinking, because I'm going to revisit the last story just for a little bit. Not the one about the Philadelphia Flyers, but the one in the Mall of America, about being told to take off his shirt. That's the one that's kind of got me thinking, got me kind of working on it a little bit here. And when I'm thinking about that, I mentioned before that it kind of started the fact that he had a history with this mall. And it made me ask the question a little bit, why did he choose to specifically wear that shirt inside that mall? And part of it kind of made me question, was he doing it to be provocative? In other words, what I mean by that is he admitted a couple of weeks prior that he'd been proselytizing. I'm going to use the word, it's the correct word here. He's proselytizing. He's witnessing. We often call it witnessing, but technically the dictionary definition is proselytizing, seeking to win converts, I guess is what you're looking for. There's nothing wrong with that, because truthfully that's ultimately my goal, but my goal is not so much that. My goal is to strengthen disciples already, is what I seek to do. But I'd obviously a witness as well. And he was told not to. He was told not to do that there, and then he was given a 24-hour ban, and then he comes back to the same place. And now I haven't seen everything on it. My question would have been: Is he actually shopping? Is he actually shopping? Given it's a very crowded place, it's not a good place for walking. It's rather a place for shopping. It's not a place to get exercise. It might be a good place to get something to eat. I don't know. I stay out of big malls. The biggest mall I've ever been is the Florida Mall. I've been there maybe once, twice maybe. Kind of thing. Spent way too much time there. I really did. Not because of me, but because of the family. And so it was one of those things. Was he going for trouble a little bit? And the reason I'm asking that is going to lead into what I want to talk about in this second half. Because there's definitely no question that what we're facing with in our culture is a hostility towards the gospel. We are facing a hostility towards the gospel. Even looking at that Philadelphia Flyers one again, that same broadcaster basically says he either detests or he's afraid of people who say that they won't do something because of their beliefs. And then he slams them a little bit. He's talking about, he wants to call them hypocrites, basically, without calling them hypocrites. Yeah, whatever. Typical excuse. Like, I'm not going to believe in God because somebody who believes in God somewhere did something that was against what they're supposed to believe, so therefore it's wrong. Everything about God's wrong. It doesn't make any sense, but that's often what they often talk about. But he does bring up this point. Everyone's like, any faith or any religion that would lead you into bigotry, they're saying, must be done away with. And this is where cognitive dissonance comes in, because obviously they don't realize to make such a statement, they themselves have to be bigotry against it. And what I mean by that is they're saying that anything like that must be done away with because we now accept this. So that has to be gone. You've got to be all-inclusive, and if you're not, you should be done away with. So we're all-inclusive kind of thing. It doesn't make any sense. But so we're living in a culture, and if you looked at this week and last podcast, the last episode of the podcast, I covered articles where one, like I said, remember the lady outside the abortion clinic praying silently on a day that the abortion clinic is closed, not interacting with anybody, not saying anybody, not stopping anybody. And she was arrested. Guy in Mall of America wearing a shirt that Jesus saves, Jesus is the only way. Getting told either get out of the mall or take the shirt off. Philadelphia Flyer player chooses to skip the warm-up practice because he will not wear a Pride jersey because it doesn't fit his belief system. This is all stuff within the last month, 2023. These are major stories, 2023. You go back even further than that. Last year, I covered an event in the MLB where 5 players refused to put a gay pride patch on their uniform, and the hostility that came against them. And it's picking up. And so the question is, what's the Christian supposed to do? And that's what I want to talk about in this half. I know this is a bit of a longer introduction. I know you've already bared with me if you've been with me the whole show, about 45 minutes now. We're getting at 50 minutes. So we're getting a little bit long today. And sorry, I get a lot to talk about. But I want to talk about this idea. And to do that, I want to go first to 1 Peter. I want to go over to 1 Peter chapter 3. And I want to note something about Peter here. And before I do that, I want us to know, and I've said this before, it's not a sin to offend people. It's not a sin to make people upset. But then you've got to ask, why are you doing it? That's the question. That was my question about the guy in the models. The more I thought about it, why was he wearing the shirt? What was he doing it solely to draw people to Christ? Was he doing it just because it was a shirt he had and he wanted to wear as he went shopping? Or did he do it as a kind of a stick it to the security of the mall? And so the question is, it's not a sin to offend people, but why are we as Christians offending people? And I'm going to answer that in 2 ways here. I'm going to do it one here through what Peter writes, and I'm going to go visit Jesus. Always a good place to go. Although I hold that all scriptures are God-breathed. I just mean I'm going to go visit in a time during the earthly ministry of Jesus. But let me visit here 1 Peter 3. It says, "And who is he who will harm you if you become followers of good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you are blessed. And do not be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled, but sanctify the Lord your God in your heart, and always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. For having a good conscience, that when the day they may defame you as evildoers, those who revile your good conduct in Christ may be ashamed. For it is better, if it is the will of God, to suffer for doing good than for evil." Now, that last line is the crutch of what I want to bring out in Peter here. Because, and I've seen this, and this is happening in our society in a variety of ways, and I saw an article here not too long ago, I'm not quite sure how long this one was ago, where a lady was in a cafe at a university where she was eating in a place that was closed, and the janitor, who had poor eyesight, called security because it's unwise for him to approach anybody by himself in that kind of setting. to inform them that they have to leave, and there's more going on, but they were just kind of sitting there in a place where they weren't supposed to be. It's because children were going to be in that area and kind of thing, and so a strange adult, that kind of thing. But they made a report that the gender did it because they're racist, that they were black, and therefore the gender did it. Kind of thing. I remember another article about a woman who was strip searched at the airport, and she claimed it was racial profiling in that case. And those two things, what they have in common is that it had nothing to do with race. It had to do with the fact that they were breaking rules. In the First Lady's case, she was in a place where she shouldn't have been. And she knew she shouldn't have been. She just chose to do it anyway. And then when called out on it, she said they called her out because she was black. No, she was called out because she was breaking the rules. The other lady who was strip searched, she had actually been traveling back from Colombia, South America, and she had done numerous trips back and forth constantly. Now that itself is not unusual. What's unusual is all of them were paid for in cash. This is a red flag. So multiple trips back and forth, short trips back and forth, all paid for very relatively close to time of departure in cash. And cocaine traces were found on articles in her suitcase. And when she was asked, she became belligerent. So it had nothing to do with the color of her skin. And my point was of that, and these things have happened, and is when a Christian is being persecuted, when a Christian is being confronted for something that by people on the outside, the question I have to ask is: Are we being persecuted because we are breaking the rules, but not God's rules? We're breaking rules that are both man's law and God's law at the same time. In other words, you can't claim. It's just easier to pick on the racist stuff here, just because you can't claim that a police officer pulls you over because they're racist if you've been speeding and they at the same time. You were pulled over because you were speeding, not because of your sex, race, gender, creed, whatever. You're pulled over because you're speeding. And so when it comes to the Christian, one of the things I want us to point out is, are we being called things such as unloving? And I've been called this. I read one of the comments on a video I had to the teens, and they went, wow. And I was called hateful, unloving, bigotry, all this kind of stuff. And I was called all this. And the question is, are we guilty of actually being that? Or is it just because they don't like the message? And what Peter wants to say is this fact that I want us to check ourselves to make sure that if we are suffering, that we're suffering for good. Daniel, in the book of Daniel, when he was in Medo-Persia, there you go. When was he in Medo-Persia? Well, technically, when he was taken into captivity, he was taken into captivity by the Babylonian, and even the Babylonians. But while he was there, the Babylonians were conquered by the Medo-Persians, and so he, without ever leaving, he switched empires. So when he was in Medo-Persia, a law had passed that he was not allowed to pray to anybody but the king. And Daniel refused to obey this, and so he prayed to God, the God of heaven and earth, and they reported. And Daniel was, and I said he was persecuted for religious beliefs in this case. That's what we're going to say. He was persecuted because of his faith. It was against the law, but it was for his faith. And so for the Christian, I want us to ask, when we're facing persecution, are we facing, I want us to double check this, are we facing persecution because we're actually in the wrong? That's just it. Are we facing persecution because we're actually in the wrong? You can't say you're being persecuted for religious beliefs when you really are harassing people. And I'm thinking here, if you date yourself back a little bit, the name just suddenly escaped me. The church down in Westboro Baptist, there it is, Westboro Baptist Church in the States that would protest and hold up signs that really were offensive and wrong and hateful, that kind of thing. We're talking like they would protest soldiers' returns and with signs that thank God for dead soldiers, like things like that. That they deserve what is coming down on them, came down on them. That because of that, and so one of the things is Peter's asking the question of them. Make sure that you are having a good conscience. That's what he says here. Having a good conscience, verse 16 there, that when they defame you as evildoers, those who revile your good conduct in Christ may be ashamed. In other words, that they're hating you because you're following Christ, not for any other reason. That's one of the things that as Christians we have to understand. And we're going to, if you're living the Christian life, Paul writes to Timothy, and he says, anybody who seeks to live godly in Christ Jesus is going to suffer persecution. That's what's going to happen. And so the question we have to ask is, are we living that godly life? And if we are, we're going to suffer persecution. And this is where Peter comes in. But he says, sanctify the Lord your God in your heart. So in other words, make sure God is the part that he's set there. He's the one who's put in there. And because of that, that you're ready to give an defense for those who ask. If somebody says that you're homophobic, be ready to give a response to that is loving, that is in meekness and fear of God, and give an answer to why that is. I've been called, like I said, I was called unloving and bigotry because of stance on homosexuality, that I said that a Christian should not support a homosexual union. And I was told that that's unloving. And what's the answer to that? Now, as a Christian, we're not supposed to get up in arms. We're not supposed to get offended. That's the point here. What we're supposed to do is be able to give an answer for it, to give a defense for it to everyone who asks, whether they're asking nicely or not. But the answer to that question nicely is, look, here's what the scriptures say. Here, the scriptures clearly point out, God has said. Sorry, Lauren Daigle, when you're saying, what, I'm not God, I don't know what God says. And she did say that. Go look that up. Lauren Daigle on Ellen DeGeneres speaking on homosexuality. You can just look that up. Lauren Daigle, homosexuality. Where she says, I'm not sure what God says. And she's sticking it to the same thing that Amy Grant was, which is simply, I know people who are gay. That's fine. That's good. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I applaud you for that. But the thing is, homosexuality is wrong. It is wrong. It is sinful. God is against sin. That's all sin. That's all sexual sin. All mouth sin. I'm talking about speaking sin. Unholy talk. God is against it all. God is against all sins of the heart. Idolatry, theft, covetousness, greed. God's against all sin. And that all sin has a punishment. And unless a person repents and changes their mind of sin and turns towards Jesus Christ, they're going to spend eternity in hell. And it is more unloving, boring here from Penn, the magician Penn, saying it is unloving and even hateful to not warn the person of their sin, that they're on the path to hell. If the Christian refuses to acknowledge that there is a hell, how are they ever going to warn people how to get out of it, how to avoid it? And so the answer is, I'm not afraid of homosexuals, and that's why I speak out. I'm afraid for them. When I talk against these things, I'm afraid for the people. And I want them on the right path. I want them on a path that's not self-destructive, and I want them on a path that'll point them to true contentment, true love, and true joy. And if Christians stand on that, they have to be able to answer for that. That's what it is. But notice that it says, even what everything that happens, verse 13, it ultimately says, and who is he who will harm you if you become followers of what is good? And ultimately, in the end, I want us to always remember this. And Jesus said that never fear the one who can destroy body but not the soul. The early church fathers, the apostles, they spoke up about the gospel. They stood at the face of tyranny. They really did. They spoke out against it. And they paid the ultimate price for it. And because of that, their lives were taken, and that's what happened. But they're not lost. Although their bodies were taken, they're redeemed in Christ. And I want us to have that same strength. And so I want us, as we live in this world, and asking, why do we suffer? Why does a Christian suffer? And I'm not talking about general suffering in life. I'm talking about being hated by the world and those around us. I'm asking us to consider first, as we answer that question, are we bringing it on ourselves for a valid reason? That's what I'm asking us to consider. Are we purposely doing something? You can't say, let's use another example here, that my wife is persecuting me for being a man if I've had an affair on her. She has a valid reason to be upset at me. And that's because I had an affair. And I sinned against her and against God. So that's the first question I want us to ask. And when we're trying to answer that little question, is why do we suffer? In other words, for the God, as a Christian, why do we suffer as Christians? So first, make sure that we're not bringing it on ourselves because we actually deserve it, and I mean deserve it because we're breaking God's law. That's what I'm talking about here, and how I'm gonna, in that statement, I just want to take a second. I'm gonna define God's law in this case as including man's law that does not go against God's law. What I mean by that is speeding would be breaking God's law. Why? Because there's nowhere in the Bible that says thou shalt not speed. There's not. And the speed limits are set there by man. God has ordained human authorities until his return. And so in that case, submit to governing authorities in accordance with what even Peter says. In that same section of Peter, actually, 1 Peter, submit to governing authorities as submitting to the Lord. And so unless the government passes laws that are contrary to the Word of God, to break those laws or to break God's law. So unless they come up and say, you must pray to the government or something along those lines, or you are not allowed to ever proclaim Jesus anywhere. Yeah, okay, sorry, the Christian's going to have to break that because we have the command from God to go forth and proclaim the gospel. So that's the first one. That's not the end here. I want to continue to answer that question a little bit. And I said I wanted to go visit the time of Jesus. So I'm going to go John 15. This is the upper room. Jesus speaking to his disciples. And he's going to talk about the suffering that they're going to come. And why it is. And he says, look this. He says, if the world hates you, know that it hated me first before it hated you. And I always want Christians to remember that because it puts things into perspective. That they're not fighting against you. When a Christian proclaims the gospel, or the Christian stands on the gospel truth, be it online, be it in person, when they do it in love, and they stand on it, and people come back with such visceral, hate-filled tirades, and such, and they will. I want the Christian to remember, don't take it personally. Because it's not you that they're going after. It's not you that they hate. It's the one whom you represent. That's who it is. They hate Christ. This is what Jesus is saying. If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. That is what they're fighting against. That is what they're off against. They're fighting against Jesus. And so the reason that the Christian can feel such hatred, the reason the Christian can feel such attack from the outside is because that the world is not fighting at us. It's against Jesus. That security guard in the mall who was visceral against the guy saying, you've got to take off that shirt. That's not against him. It's against Jesus. The broadcaster who's calling out the Philadelphia Flyers player, saying that the NHL should be fining the team, should be banned us. He said, I detest everybody who does this. He's not fighting against the player. It's against Christ. The police who arrested The woman in the UK outside the abortion clinic who was praying silently. They were not against her. They're against Christ. That's who it's against. And justice, look, if you were of the world would love its own. This is one of those things, and this is a red flag for all things. And I'm going to talk about, I'm lumping in here, those who hold the title Christian, Christian authors, Christian musicians, Christian speakers, movie makers, whatever, athletes, whatever. If the world absolutely loves them and accepts them, then take a second look at them. Be very cautious of them. That's kind of the warning I'm given there. Because if the world loves them, and we'll take a band, say a Christian band that is playing both sides. In other words, their music is being played on secular stations quite a bit, and that, as a Christian, I'll tell you, you first go in and you hear it, you're like, oh, that sounds great, that's great, yay, he's playing. I'm not talking about going into a store that has the music playing, because I remember going into a Pizza Hut one time, we were eating, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, I'm like, that's Stephen Curtis Chapman playing. So yeah, it is, and they're playing it all. I'm talking about you go into a store that has a radio playing, and it has songs from Christian artists constantly playing, and it's not a Christian radio station. I would start to take a look at that Christian band's lyrics closely and what they're really saying. And the reason for that is because a lot of times if the world is accepting of it, then that means there's nothing in it that's going to offend them. And the gospel of Christ is offensive. So that's just a warning there. It says, yet you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. Now Jesus isn't referring to his crucifixion here. That's about to come up. That's coming up. He's talking about the fact that in his hometown, he was driven out, tried to throw off a cliff. We're talking about he did a good work. They tried to stone him. This is what we're talking about. He said if they did that because of these things, they're going to do these things to you. And he said, they persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. They'll agree with it. But all these things they will do that you will do for my name's sake, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would have no sin. But now they have no excuse for sin. That's what's going on. You want to know why the world hates the church, why the true church, why the world hates the Christian. Because when they see the Christian, the Spirit of Christ is speaking. The Spirit of Christ is proclaiming. And one of the things that it does is convicts of sin. It reveals sin. But because he is speaking, they now have no excuse for the sin. And they hate it. Why? Because whether we like it or not, sin feels good. Sin feels good when we're doing it. If it didn't feel good, we wouldn't do it. Sin at the moment feels great. It gives us a dopamine hit. It gives us serotonin. It gives us these highs. It feels good at the moment. But it never brings about anything lasting. That's why they go from one thing to the next. And because it gives that instant satisfaction, that people, when coming out and say you shouldn't be doing this is bad, people hate Christ for it. That's what it is. And then they can't even claim that they love God when they hate Christ. See, this is kind of the thing that people don't even get a grasp here. It becomes a chain. If the Christian is living the Christian life, and I'm talking about living the Christian life, not just Christian in name only. They live the Christian life, and if they're hated by the world, but the person says they love God, but they hate the Christian, they don't love God. Because if they don't love the Christian, then they don't love Jesus. If they don't love Jesus, then they can't love the Father, because that's what Jesus said. He who hates me hates my Father also, verse 23. See, that's just it. It really comes down to hate. Jesus continues, if I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would have no sin. But now that they have seen and also hated both me and my Father. But this is happening that the word might be fulfilled, which is written in their law, they hated me without cause. That's an important detail there too. A lot of times when people hate the Christian, they can't even really pick out why. It's why they come up with slogans. Hence why they say, oh, you're homophobic. And to make that fit, they had to change the definition of the word. You're transphobic. They had to change the definition of the word. You're a fascist, but they don't even know what that means. See, this is what's happening. And this is a little different second half. I know it seems almost that I may be kind of rambling off on the top here. I gotta admit, a little more M on this one, because I didn't have it as planned out as I normally. Normally, I've got it planned out where I'm gonna go, and so this one's a little more off the cuff, more say. But it's that understanding of why do we get persecuted? Why? And I want us to self-reflect here for ourselves, because I really do believe that in 2023, we're going to see more and more of this rise of Antichrist spirit in the world. We are. Where it's against Christ. And that means the Christian is going to suffer. And it should be, if we're going to suffer, it's got to be for our faith. It's got to be. It can't be because we're just becoming jaded or cold. It's got to be for our faith. And it's got to be for the right reason. And with that, when it comes, I want us to understand that for the Christian, it's not even about us. It's because they hate Christ. They don't have an anti-Christian spirit. They've got an anti-Christ spirit. That's who they're at war against. And the Christian is the physical representation. And so that's why it's going the way it is. And so for the Christian, we should never think of it that it's a personal. We should look at them the same way Christ did. And what did Christ do on the cross? Instead of telling the Father to bring down judgment on him, he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they did. He's showing mercy and love. And this is what Christ has shown for us. And so we should be showing it to those around us as well. And so it's one of those things that we follow the scripture. It says, as long as it's possible, be at peace with everybody. But it's not going to be possible as we live in a world that's becoming more and more anti-Christ spirit filled. And so I want us to understand that it's not us, but I also want us to understand that there's nothing that can separate us from Christ. And I don't want us to be shocked from suffering persecution or suffering hardship. Rather, just turn it towards Christ and turn it towards praise towards Him. That's kind of what I want us to look at and to focus on as we're going to go forward in this year. But as you go forward, and that's what it means to build on Christ, the solid foundation. And being there will give us the ability to answer the questions for the hope that we have in us. Defend why we hold what we hold. And then remember that they're not against us, it's against Christ. And so from there, show love to all. Because that's where we need to be. All right, I'm going to end there for today. So that might have been a little bit different of the second half for you. It's a little bit more of just me kind of talking, I guess. Not so much as teaching in the same way as there is some there. But if you got any input or insight you'd like to hit, come on, send it to me. I'd love to hear from you. I also kind of need your help a little bit. You want to support, continue to spread the word. It is growing a little bit. It is starting to fan out a little bit. If you guys find it not just fascinating, but helpful and encouraging and strengthening, I encourage you, send it on to people. Go back, and you think other episodes would be better, send them on. See if we can grow this a little bit. Because it's all done out of love. It's all done for the service of Christ. But as always, you can write me at pastorsteventeed@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can write it in on YouTube. Until next time, I pray that you grow in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And as always, stand firm on the solid foundation of Jesus.